Hey, welcome. So today, we're going to tackle a really fascinating idea. One that kind of flips a huge belief about happiness right on its head. We're all told, right? A packed social calendar is the key to a good life. But what if, for some people, the exact opposite is true? Let's dive into the pretty cool science behind solitude. All right, let's jump right in with a question that, honestly, most of us think we already know the answer to. Social connection, it feels like a basic human need, doesn't it? Right up there with food and water. But is the formula really that simple? More friends just equals more happiness, period? Well, it turns out the research says things are, well, they're a little more complicated than that. Okay, first things first, let's get the baseline straight. For the vast majority of us, the link between having strong friendships and living a happy, fulfilling life is, it's incredibly well documented. This is the general rule, and believe me, it's a powerful one.
And look, this isn't just a hunch or some feel-good idea. We're talking major systematic reviews, like the ones from scholars Pezerkanides and El-Seroni. They've confirmed over and over again that quality friendships are consistently tied to higher life satisfaction. So yeah, the conventional wisdom is absolutely on the money, for most of us anyway.
But this is where the story takes a really sharp turn. There was this landmark study back in 2016, published in the British Journal of Psychology by Liu and Kanazawa. They decided to look a little closer at this social happiness rule, and what they found was a huge and honestly pretty shocking exception. And it all came down to one thing: intelligence. So check this out. This is what they found, and it's wild. For people with, let's say, average intelligence, the data shows exactly what you'd expect: a clear, positive line. More socializing means more happiness. Simple. But then, look what happens for people with higher intelligence. Suddenly, that link gets a whole lot weaker. And in some cases, it actually starts to flip and go the other way.
Yeah, you heard that right. It wasn't just a weaker connection. For the most intelligent people in their study, spending more time with friends was actually linked to lower life satisfaction. That is just a stunning, completely counterintuitive discovery. It just makes you go, wait, what on earth is happening here? So to really figure this puzzle out, we have to get past the what and dig deep into the why. And what researchers think is that it all boils down to three key psychological mechanisms. These three things really explain how, for certain people, solitude can actually be a powerful engine for happiness.
So what are they? Well, it's basically these three big ideas. First, there's what's called cognitive engagement, which is just the unique joy of really deep thinking. Second, there's the powerful motivation you get from making progress on your goals. And third, it's the simple need for our brains to kind of cool down and regulate emotionally. Okay, let's start with that first one: cognitive engagement. This is basically the thrill that some people get from, wrestling with a complex problem, or learning something new, or just thinking deeply about things. So for them, solitude isn't some empty void to be filled. No way. It's a rich resource. It's the quiet, uninterrupted space they need to do this kind of deeply satisfying mental work. And this quote really just nails it. The stimulation they crave comes from inside their own head. So when you think about it that way, constant social interaction, well, it stops being a bonus. It actually becomes a distraction, pulling them away from something that's already giving them a huge sense of fulfillment. All right, on to our second key, which is goal progress. Now, a huge meta-analysis back in 2015 basically confirmed something that I think we all kind of feel in our gut, right? That making real, meaningful progress on goals we actually care about, that feeling is one of the most reliable sources of happiness you can find.
So it begs the question, which environment is better for making that progress? Just think about it. Solitude. It gives you these controlled blocks of time, very few distractions, and that intense focus you need for what people call deep work. Now, socializing is great, it's fun, but it can also bring constant interruptions and what economists and psychologists call a high opportunity cost. It's simple. Every hour you spend chatting is an hour you can't spend writing that novel, or finishing that project, or mastering that new skill. And that brings us to our third and final key: emotional regulation. Just picture someone whose mind is constantly processing really complex information. It's like their brain is always running at full speed. For that person, choosing to be alone isn't about feeling lonely. It's a vital system cooldown. It's their way of lowering all that mental stimulation and just bringing their attention and their emotions back down to a calm, stable baseline. Okay, now this next part is absolutely crucial, so let's be super clear about this. This research is not saying that intelligent people are antisocial. It's not saying they're misanthropes who hate people or that they don't need friends. That is the number one way people get this wrong. The real story here is much more subtle. It's about efficiency. So let's just break this down to be crystal clear. What this research doesn't say is that smart people are lonely or that they lack social skills. Not at all. What it does say is that it's more like an economic calculation in their head. The extra little bit of happiness they might get from one more social event, what economists call the marginal benefit, it's just lower for them. Meanwhile, the time they lose for their personal projects, that opportunity cost we talked about, is way higher. So for them, solitude just becomes a more efficient tool for achieving happiness.
And all of this brings us to a final and I think really critical point. Solitude isn't just one thing. Being alone isn't automatically good or bad. Its real value, the impact it has on our well-being, depends entirely on how it's used. It's about whether it's chosen and what we do with that precious time. So when you look at the research, the most beneficial, the happiest kind of solitude seems to have these three key ingredients. First, it has to be autonomous. That means you chose it. It wasn't forced on you. Second, it's goal-oriented. You're using that time to create something or learn something or make progress. And third, it's cognitively engaging. Your mind is active and fulfilled, not just bored and waiting for something to happen.
So if there's one big takeaway, it's this. We're not talking about isolation here. We're talking about a completely different recipe for happiness. It's a recipe that, for some people, relies a lot less on the frequency of their social life and a whole lot more on the quality of the time they spend in that goal-driven, autonomous solitude.
And that really just leaves us with a final question to think about for ourselves. We all need connection, of course we do, but we also all need time alone. The real trick is finding the right balance for you. So maybe take a second to think about it. What kind of solitude is it that truly fuels you? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.